I have another video of Tony Blair. This was in his response to the Chilcot report, which said that he misled his country into a war on purpose. And he was grossly, he's responsible, right? And he lied about things, and he said the opposite of what his intelligence people had said. So he misled everybody. And he's not backing off. But, so here I'm going to play a little bit of it. He has a little bit more to say. First, he talks about the UN. Because, by the way, if you remember, the UN said, no, you can't go into Iraq. They said, remember, they tried to hold, and they said no. So that means when you go into Iraq, that's a war of aggression. That's a war crime. That's a war of aggression. That's a war crime. And you know why Tony Blair and George Bush and Dick Cheney and Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice aren't at The Hague? Because they won. Because they're the winners. If you start a war of aggression and you win, there's nobody to hold you accountable. So what's happening in America on a small scale of two-tier justice system, we're all watching it happen, is also happening over across the pond on a bigger scale even. So here's what here's what he had to say about the UN. Let's listen to this. He thought about this for a long time. This is what he thought.
Fourth, we can all agree in principle the UN is the right body to decide issues of international policy, including the justification for the use of force.
Oh, we can all agree that the UN is the right body, except when they don't give you the decision you want and say you can't go invade a country, except then.
But the reality is the UN is gridlocked effectively with Russia and USA regularly on different sides on similar issues.
See, I agree the UN should make the decision, but they're deadlocked. So I had to go ahead and do it myself and start murdering people in Iraq. It's okay. It's okay. Because I had to, hey, look, I know better than the UN. They're gridlocked. So I just said, I get it. But I'm gonna go ahead with George Bush and Dick Cheney and slaughter a bunch of Iraqis for oil. Because the UN, they're gridlocked. This is...
How can the UN be reformed? How can a clearer set of rules be agreed with a...
How can we reform the UN? The UN doesn't need reforming. They're the ones who said don't go into Iraq. He starts pointing fingers everywhere. Everything else is messed up, except him.
In what measure of objectivity? Fifth, we must understand the true nature of the threat we face.
Okay, this is the part that kind of turns my stomach. So, Tony Blair, got to be one of the biggest terrorists in the world. If not the biggest terrorist, but maybe George Bush, Dick Cheney, bigger than him, but he's right there with him. He's shoulder to shoulder. Right? I mean, this isn't a hyperbole, right?
Rumsfeld, Cheney.
But this is literally, you ignored the UN. You say they should be the ones making the rules, but when they made that rule I didn't like, I'd ignored them. I did an extrajudicial killing, is what he did, of hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq, because he knew better. Because he knew better. That's what that is. And so right now he's going to tell you, but we got to look out for the terrorists. This is the biggest murderer in Europe. Telling us we got to look out for someone else who might want to do some murdering. Watch this. This is awesome.
It is Islamist extremism and its ideology. And we need urgently to put in place a unified, comprehensive strategy to defeat it. This should be a combination of hard and soft power, including a global commitment on education to reform education systems, the encouragement of modern-minded and reformist clerics within Islam, and an effective countering of the propaganda of the extremists.
Yes, we must confront Islamic extremism, Tony. Never mind the West's military extremism. It's somebody else who doesn't even own a fucking jet. It's someone else that we got to keep our eye on. Even though I'm the biggest murderer on the continent, we got to still keep it. There's Muslims and they're not white and they don't look like us. So they're worse than us because they kill people with butcher knives, whereas I blow your head off. I'm civilized. You ever see ISIS? They cut your head off with a butcher knife. We use bombs, which hug you to death. Those guys are animals. We'll hug you to death. We'll give you one time. What we do is we have bombs, and then little puppies fly out of them, and they lick your face till you're dead. That's what happens. That's how Tony Blair's bombs kill.
And then we need an honest debate in the West about our own values and level of commitment to them.
But if there's one guy to call for an honest debate, it's the biggest fucking liar about wars in the history of lying about wars. Thanks, Tony.
The West has a big decision to take. Does it believe it has a strategic interest in the outcome of the struggle in the Middle East and elsewhere around these issues of Islamist extremism? And if so, what level of commitment is it prepared to make to shape the outcome? My view is obviously that it does have such an interest and should make the necessary commitment. So in conclusion, many will find it impossible to reconcile themselves to the decision to remove Saddam or my motives in taking it.
Yes, Tony. Iraq was clearly a real threat to the UK.
But it is vital we do not continue to allow controversy over Iraq to obscure what are real contemporary threats to world security.
The real contemporary threats to world security is you. Was you. And the Western military power. That's the real threat. We bombed 7 different Muslim countries since 9/11. You guys invaded a whole country. You upset the Middle East. You've set the table for World War III. You got Republicans in the United States saying, I want to shoot down Russian airplanes over Syria. You've set the table for World War III, and there's someone else who's worse than you? The real threat to security is someone else?
Which reflect absolutely the difficulties we actually encountered in Iraq. This extremism menaces so many nations, those who were with us in Iraq and those who opposed Iraq, those who have an aggressive foreign policy and those who have a Pacific one, developed and developing.
It's the extremism. It's the Islamic extremism. He's not extreme at all. At all. We just had a report that pretty much called you a war criminal. But you're not extreme. Those other guys, though, super extreme.
Where's that guy who threw that shoe at Bush?
Yeah.
North and south, wealthy and poor. This is the scourge of our time. It's the challenge of our generation.
This is the scourge. He's still the scourge of our time. The scourge of our time. That's like Hitler going, we really got to watch out for global warming.
Us to act
I mean, they're both serious. You're not the messenger. They're both serious. Global warming and Nazism. Both serious things. Tony Blair, not the messenger to talk about.
Even when imperfectly. At some point, we will reach for and achieve the unified, comprehensive foreign and defense policy that can defeat it. Iraq will be a chapter in this struggle and an important one.
He's still like, Iraq was that's a chapter. We're fighting this bigger struggle. The biggest terrorist in the world, again, is you.
But it wasn't the first, and it won't be the last. I want to thank Sir John and his team for the report, for the time and care it's taken. I also want this day to pay tribute to Sir Martin Gilbert, who so tragically passed away before the report was concluded. We can't make decisions with the benefit of hindsight, but we can and we should learn from our experience and from the mistakes that were made.
Yes. But, when
Mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made, and we must learn from them. Let's see. Have we learned from them? Let's see. Have we learned?
I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran. And I want them to understand that, because it does mean that they have to look very carefully at their society, because whatever stage of development they might be in their nuclear weapons program in the next 10 years, during which they might foolishly consider launching an attack on Israel, we would be able to totally obliterate them.
On Friday.
We've learned from our mistakes. We say stuff like that. We're going to totally obliterate people after we just illegally obliterated a couple 100,000 people.
Obliterate.
Tony Blair had to cut his speech short because he was late to a paid appearance at a war contractor dinner. When you decide to go to war based on lies, in the end, all you can do is lie to yourself. And, Tony Blair went on to say, some people wonder why I spend so much time in the Middle East. This is why. I think you spend so much time in the Middle East avoiding getting subpoenaed for war crimes. I think that's why. Oh, by the way, This is the deputy prime minister, what he had to say about talking about radicalized Muslims. He said, when I hear people talk about how people are radicalized young Muslims, I'll tell you how they are radicalized. Every time they watch the television where their families are worried, their kids are being killed or murdered, and rockets, firing on all these people, that's what radicalizes them. Really? So you kill a couple 100,000 people in Iraq and that you don't think that radicalizes anybody? They're probably that book they read. I've said this, and I'll say it again. If they found out there was oil in Salt Lake City and we bombed Utah for 15 years straight, there'd be a lot of Mormon terrorists.